My friends, the Kursk operation is perhaps one of Ukraine's greatest blunders of the entire war. Honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what was going on in the minds of Ukrainian generals. Why did they hold on to the Kursk Salient for so long? At first, in August 2024, it seemed as if Ukraine would score an important victory on Russia, advancing columns, raising flags, and many prisoners of war. Ukraine managed to stun Russia with a quick jab, until Ukraine tried to bring down that sumo wrestler they were facing. We all know what happened next.
Come here, I'm gonna eat you! Get in my belly!
As the months progressed, the Ukrainian salient inside Russia kept shrinking, until everything collapsed in early March with Operation Pipeline. And as you might have seen on Deep State by now, Ukraine has essentially lost all its positions in Kursk Oblast. I don't know about you, but to me, the Kursk operation highlighted many weaknesses of Ukraine's general staff in terms of operational planning. They sort of learned from the 2023 counteroffensive, but again, not really. So today we will analyze Ukraine's top 5 mistakes during the Kursk operation. And as I started digging, the rabbit hole kept sinking deeper and deeper. As a reminder, if you're new to this entire Kursk saga, here are all the episodes I did on the topic. If you're interested, links are in the description below. Without further ado, let's jump right in. Mistake number 1. Ukraine clearly didn't have the resources for such an operation. You see, in mid-July 2024, the Ukrainian command discreetly moved its forces to Sumy Oblast under the pretense of training and equipment pickup, a deception that helped maintain operational secrecy. This maneuver was very well done. I'm sure Russian generals were just laughing in their headquarters. They were just trolling, talking about an invasion of Sumy Oblast, and then the Ukrainian command sent thousands of forces there to defend the entire region. Silly Ukrainians! I guess it's the Ukrainians that got the last laugh. So up until now, everything is good. Ukraine gathered an elite task force for the initial breakthrough, composed of the 80th and 82nd Air Assault Brigades, as well as the 22nd Mechanized Brigade. Can you guess how many soldiers they assembled for the invasion of Russia? 50,000? 20,000? 10,000? Nope. 6,000 troops. Yeah, 6,000. From there, the Ukrainian command skillfully managed to infiltrate enemy lines, create a breach, and exploit it, which in itself was an impressive feat of arms. Followed a real shock and awe operation, which allowed the Ukrainians to secure the town of Sudzha around the 14th of August. In order to maintain this pace, the order of the day was speed. As a result, a lot of pockets of Russian troops were left behind. Ukraine's lightly armored columns kept pushing out to expand their area of control, but only captured potato field after potato field out in the Pampa, instead of securing important tactical objectives like the town of Karinyeva or securing the banks of the same river on their left flank. In such operations, typically the second wave is the one meant to mop up enemy pockets of resistance, in order to allow the first wave to move on to these critical objectives. However, in this case, the second wave was clearly not strong enough. We're talking about maybe 1,000 to 2,500 extra reinforcements composed of a patchwork of detachments from various units, like the 95th Air Assault Brigade and the 61st and 88th Mechanized Brigades. What do you expect from 1,500 men scattered on a 35-kilometer front? Eventually, Russian reinforcements arrived. Soon enough, the Ukrainian battle group got bogged down and cornered. After that, momentum was lost and eventually the Ukrainians started losing ground. But that's not the worst. Due to the lack of manpower, many weaker units participated in the operation as a way to add volume, such as the 101st and 103rd Territorial Defense Brigades. You know, like when you go to restaurants and they give you a small steak, a couple fries, and a ton of salad just to make the quantity look bigger. Typically, these brigades are mostly manned by older mobilized personnel, and they don't have the best equipment either. Since territorial defense brigades are not strong enough to mount assaults, They were deployed to protect the flanks, in order to allow the more capable brigades to concentrate in the center and expand the salient. If the territorial defense battalions on the right flank held their ground, as they benefited from favorable terrain like forests, swamps, and rivers, the ones on the left flank found themselves exposed in open terrain. To no surprise, this is exactly where the Russians shoved it in and created this big bulge inside Ukrainian lines. Oh yeah, talking about this. The Ukrainian command also didn't have any reserves to block any serious Russian counterattack. When the Russians pushed out of Karinyeva and took Snagost, the Ukrainian battle group tried to outflank the Russian flanking maneuver by striking towards Glushkova. The Ukrainians scrambled whatever was left at the rear. They assembled elements from the 21st Mechanized Brigade, the 225th Assault Battalion, and the 95th Assault Brigade, and then sent this Kampfgruppe forward. In theory, it was a brilliant idea, which even had some initial success. But just like before, there was simply not enough pack-a-punch to really break through. What could a battalion tactical group do against an entire division? In the end, because of this push, Ukrainian losses in vehicles and equipment started stacking up. In this video, we see about 16 armored vehicles abandoned or destroyed along the main road leading to Vesloye. What a disaster! Looking back, I think the Ukrainians simply didn't have enough engineering vehicles to create paths across minefields. So in order to maintain speed, all the vehicles used the main road as an attack lane. And that's also where they suffered massive casualties. The lack of manpower also meant that the Ukrainian command had a very hard time counterattacking and reclaiming the villages or the positions that they had just lost. Meaning every lost position would be essentially gone for good. In the end, due to its small size, the AFU's Expeditionary Corps was confined in and around the town of Suja. A contingent of 6,000 to 10,000 soldiers was clearly not enough to hold an area 50 kilometers wide by 30 kilometers deep. Storming the cities of Karinyeva and Glushkov also proved to be too difficult for such a small force. This leads us to mistake number 2, a colossal failure by Ukrainian ISR, or Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance. The General Staff of Ukraine completely underestimated the number of troops that the Russian army had in reserve. After Ukraine launched the Kursk operation, they expected the Russians to pause their offensive in Donetsk Oblast. The Russian command simply redeployed forces from secondary fronts, areas marked as lower importance, all the while doubling down in Donetsk Oblast. Even worse, in September, despite all the ISR assets available to Ukraine, they did not notice how the Russian Army Command redeployed an entire airborne division and positioned it right under their nose towards their exposed left flank. I still don't understand how the Russians were able to maneuver so many armored columns without being detected. From their entire assault detachments charged towards the undermanned Ukrainian positions. Truth be told, the Ukrainian battle group Kursk never recovered from this flanking attack. And that happened in mid-September, only 1 month after the start of the operation. And lastly, we have Operation Pipeline. After the entire drama of what happened in Avdiivka, you would think the Ukrainian command would be more careful about post-Soviet teenage mutant ninja miners crawling through sewers. We move on to mistake number 3, engaging in a battle of attrition with Russia. The moment the Russian army brought in reinforcements in fall 2024, the Ukrainian battle group Kursk did not have enough reserves to match the number of enemy forces deployed, and soon found itself in numerical inferiority. Followed a battle of attrition which quickly turned Ukraine's diversion into a trap which sucked in some of its best formations. Within a couple weeks only, Kursk became one of the primary areas of effort of the AFU, but it was too much to handle and they started gagging. Throughout the entire duration of the battle, Ukraine lost a confirmed 676 pieces of military equipment, such as tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery versus 720 for the Russian armed forces. Nearly a 1-to-1 ratio. A real disaster because Ukraine will have a very hard time replacing all this equipment. The damage was especially critical for armored vehicles and artillery, as Ukrainian losses surpassed Russian ones. Now as for the Russians, of course, 720 pieces of equipment destroyed or abandoned is a lot. But since Russian forces are now in control of the terrain, they can retrieve these lost vehicles and send them to repair shops. Allegedly, up to 70% of these can be recovered and sent back to the battlefield. Now in regards to losses in personnel, unlike what the mainstream media was saying, both sides fed entire battalions right into the Kursk meat grinder. Every month between August and March, Ukraine is estimated to have wasted 20 to 23% of its forces to maintain its positions around Suja, while the Russian army lost 20 to 21% of its troops in the process. Just like with equipment losses were close to a 1-to-1 ratio. Like the saying goes, small Soviet army doesn't beat big Soviet army. Overall, as you can see, this battle of attrition was not favorable to Ukraine at all. If you want a complete breakdown of equipment and personnel losses, I highly suggest you to watch my latest video. All the details are there. I'll put the link in the description. Mistake number 4. The incompetence of Ukraine's general staff. As much as the initial strike was brilliant, a masterpiece of modern maneuver warfare, ultimately their stubbornness caused their demise. As the months went by, the chances of a renewed Ukrainian breakthrough became extremely slim, especially as Russian reinforcements arrived and started fortifying their positions. Here on Ukrainian newspaper, Unian, a commander of a Ukrainian Special Forces detachment with a call sign Favorite, said the following about Russian soldiers. They dig very well, even in the cold. Sometimes I'm myself surprised how they do it, because they can dig very quickly in -10 degrees. We can really learn from them. Once again, the mighty shovels. So in summary, Ukraine faced 2 to 3 times more enemy troops, supported by exceptional firepower, sitting in improved fortifications. In such conditions, additional gains would be impossible. Yet instead of just securing their defensive perimeter, the genius bar sitting in the Ukrainian HQ persisted with new offensive operations, despite a terrible lack of resources and trained infantrymen.
Madness and stupidity.
That's how on the 5th of January 2025, Ukrainian forces resumed offensive operations in 3 directions, with the main push towards Bolshoye Sodatskoye, a small village located on the road leading towards Kursk. As you can see in this footage, they launched multiple mechanized assaults in open terrain. The attack was very rapid, and some groups of Ukrainian infantry managed to be disembarked inside the village of Berdin. Allegedly, one of these columns was composed of up to 15 armored vehicles and 4 tanks. Russian sources claim that an entire battalion's worth of armored vehicles charged in open terrain in 3 successive waves. However, soon enough, these attack columns came under enemy artillery fire, combined with drones and tanks unleashing fire from various directions. A brave but doomed attempt to break the deadlock around Suja. As for the aftermath, I can show you this image of one of these Ukrainian assault columns, with multiple vehicles destroyed or abandoned in one big steel graveyard. Meanwhile, in this one, Russian soldiers passed by next to a burned down and caged up LAVR Titan DS vehicle. Some Ukrainian troops did manage to get a foothold inside the village, but rotating them out or just supplying them became impossible. So most likely after that, everybody was ordered to fall back. Now, even had this attack been successful, it would have only provided the AFU with a very limited tactical advantage, a couple kilometers at best, all the while exposing so many of their vehicles to Russian firepower for nothing and eroding the last valuable combat units Ukraine had available in that sector. We could even say that such orders are criminal. Yeah, it was a terrible idea. Let's just not repeat this mistake again. Right? Right?
You will get it.
1 month later in February, Ukraine launched another attack, this time towards Ulyanok. These assault detachments advanced a couple kilometers, disembarked some troops in the forest, took hold of a few buildings, before being halted and then destroyed by artillery and swarms of drones. Put simply, at this point of the battle, the price of a kilometer kept getting more costly, and Ukraine could simply not afford it. All these counterattacks were just as effective as Japanese banzai charges in the Pacific, and only accelerated the fall of the Salient. Actually, it gets worse. It seems as if the Ukrainian command suffered from its own success and did not expect to gain so much ground so rapidly. The problem is that, like everyone in the past, the invasion of Russia was exhilarating. The potential of a decisive victory on the Russians got to their heads. That's when they thought they could double down on their gamble. But that also meant sacrificing some of their last combat-ready formations. At last, mistake number 5. Withdrawing too late from the Kursk Salient. But simply, Ukraine's pullout game is weak. I think this article by New Voice summarized it well. The Kursk operation was partially justified. I agree, but Ukrainian troops should have been withdrawn earlier. We have yet another example of Ukraine's irrational and stubborn attempt to maintain useless positions they know they're gonna lose anyway while sacrificing thousands of their men. It makes me mad because it's always the same story. 3 years into this terrible war, option 1 would have been to withdraw in fall 2024. When it became clear that the Ukrainian offensive had failed to divert Russian forces from the Pokrovsk and Kurakhove directions. By that time, the surprise effect had also faded. Apart from Sudzha, no other large urban area had been captured. Ukraine started facing many problems in terms of manpower and logistics, added to the fact that Russian reinforcements kept pouring into the area of operations. By withdrawing at that moment, the Ukrainian army would have preserved the majority of its forces. By doing so, they could have launched another raid somewhere else, thus forcing the Russian command to continuously divert more and more forces to protect the northern border with Ukraine. This is what we call a successful diversion. Now let's talk about option 2. Most Ukrainian officers emphasized the fact that the defense of the Kursk salient became unjustifiable starting in early February 2025. By that point, logistics was completely shattered. There were so many enemy drones flying over Ukrainian positions that it became impossible to regularly supply or rotate to the troops positioned on the outer ring of the salient using vehicles. I've read that Ukrainian infantrymen were told to cover 18 kilometers on foot just to reach their new positions, under artillery strikes, airstrikes, and of course, drones. Lots of drones. The Russians also destroyed a number of bridges and pontoon crossings, meaning no heavy equipment such as tanks could make it into the salient. This also meant that all the Ukrainian armored vehicles that had been hit and immobilized in the salient could not even be retrieved. What a complete waste. As a matter of fact, the crewmen of these engineering vehicles simply refused the orders to go into the salient. They said it was simply too dangerous. This meant the Ukrainian forces deployed in and around Sudzha could not be properly supported by tanks or infantry fighting vehicles. Once again, Ukrainian troops sacrificed for a PR stunt. Because of that, the frontline situation became extremely critical, as Russian assault detachments started closing in on the vital supply road linking Yunakivka to Sudzha. Had the Ukrainian battle group retreated during the winter, they would have avoided this entire debacle and prevented the complete collapse of the morale of their troops. So in summary, mistake number 1, Ukraine clearly didn't have the resources to launch such an operation. Mistake number 2, Ukraine's failure in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Number 3, engaging in the battle of attrition with Russia. Next up, the incompetence of Ukrainian commanders in charge of the operation. And mistake number 5, withdrawing too late from the Kursk salient. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.